The year is 1462. A shroud of smoke hangs heavy over the hills of Wallachia, a grim testament to the villages ravaged by war. On the horizon, a storm of steel and banners gathers, the largest army the Ottoman Empire has ever assembled. They march with a single purpose: to crush this defiant land. Leading this monumental force is Sultan Mehmed II, the man who conquered Constantinople and shattered the remnants of the Byzantine Empire. He is known as the Conqueror, and his name alone makes Christian Europe tremble. His vast host is a moving city of war, a symbol of an empire's seemingly unstoppable might, stretching as far as the eye can see. Many believe him to be invincible, an instrument of divine will. But one man stands against him. One man dares to defy the might of the Ottoman Sultan. He is the ruler of this small, rugged land, Vlad III of Wallachia. History, however, would come to know him by a different name, a name whispered in fear and awe: Vlad the Impaler. Lacking the numbers to face Mehmed in open battle, Vlad knows he cannot win with brute force. His weapons will be fear, cunning, and the very soul of the land he is sworn to protect. The scale of the Ottoman invasion is staggering. Estimates place Mehmed's army between 150,000 and 300,000 soldiers. At its core are the elite Janissaries, a disciplined and unbreakable fighting force. Alongside them ride the Sipahi cavalry, their thundering charges having shattered Christian armies for decades. There are the Siales, slave soldiers fighting desperately for their freedom, making them some of the most ferocious warriors on the field. Akinji light cavalry, Silidars, Azabs, and Beslis add layers of tactical depth to this incredible force. At the very center of this military machine, protected by his personal guards, rides the Sultan himself. The army brings with it 120 heavy cannons, siege engines capable of reducing the strongest fortresses to rubble. But this is more than just an army. Engineers march alongside soldiers, ready to build bridges and roads. Priests, muezzins, and even astrologers accompany the host, making it an empire in motion. The logistical effort is immense. Ships, supply trains, workers, and even women follow in a column that stretches for miles. Facing this colossus, Vlad III commands a force of no more than 30,000 men. The imbalance is catastrophic, at least 5-1 in the Sultan's favor. Before the invasion, Mehmed had made his demands clear: an annual tribute of 10,000 ducats and 500 young Wallachian boys to be trained as Janissaries. It was the price of peace. Vlad's answer was not written in ink, but in blood. He refused. When Ottoman envoys arrived at his court to press their demands, they refused to remove their turbans in his presence, citing religious custom. Vlad, in a calculated act of brutal defiance, declared he would help them strengthen their customs. He ordered his guards to seize the envoys and nail their turbans to their heads. The message was clear: there would be no negotiation, there would be no submission, there would only be war. And Vlad did not wait to be invaded. In a move of audacious aggression, he led his army across the frozen Danube River, deep into Ottoman-held Bulgaria. He didn't just raid, he unleashed a campaign of pure terror. Villages were burned to the ground, their populations were systematically massacred. He left behind a gruesome warning for the Sultan: thousands upon thousands of bodies impaled on sharp stakes lining the roads. In a chilling letter to the King of Hungary, Vlad boasted of killing 23,184 of the enemy, not counting those who were burned in their homes or whose heads were not presented to our officials. This was not random cruelty. It was psychological warfare on an unprecedented scale, designed to shatter the morale of Mehmed's army before a single major battle was fought. Enraged by this defiance and the slaughter of his subjects, the Sultan assembled his full might. The invasion of Wallachia began. The Ottoman host crossed the Danube, their fleet of ships so numerous they darkened the river like a moving storm. They poured into Vlad's homeland, expecting to meet his army in a decisive battle. But as they advanced, they found nothing. Only silence. The villages were empty, their inhabitants having fled into the mountains and forests. The landscape itself had been turned into a weapon. Wells were poisoned with the corpses of animals. Food stores were burned or carted away. All livestock had been driven into the highlands, far beyond the reach of the invading army. Rivers were diverted from their natural courses to flood the roads, turning them into impassable swamps. The ground itself became a minefield of hidden dangers, with camouflaged pits and traps dug along the army's path. The Ottoman army, this magnificent engine of conquest, found itself marching through a desolate wasteland. Food and clean water became scarce. Under the relentless heat of the summer sun, soldiers began to collapse from exhaustion and thirst. The confident laughter that had filled the ranks just days earlier faded into a murmur of dread. They were not fighting an army, they were fighting a ghost. They were being consumed by the land itself. For 7 agonizing days, the invaders saw no sign of Vlad's army. The tension was unbearable. Then the attacks began. Not a pitched battle, but lightning-fast raids from the shadows. Wallachian cavalry, appearing as if from nowhere, would strike isolated patrols, undefended supply wagons, and the rear guard of the column. Before the Ottomans could mount a defense, the riders would melt back into the forests, leaving chaos and death in their wake. Sleep became a luxury the Ottoman soldiers could not afford. They started at every shadow, every rustle of leaves in the dense dark woods that now seemed to surround them on all sides. The psychological toll was immense. Fear and confusion began to rot the great army from within. Morale plummeted. The mighty host was slowly being broken, not by swords, but by terror. It was then that Vlad decided to escalate his campaign of fear to a personal level. He would not just attack the Sultan's army, he would walk among them. One night, disguised as an Ottoman officer and speaking flawless Turkish, Vlad the Impaler himself infiltrated the sprawling enemy camp. He moved calmly through the rows of tents, observing everything. He noted the layout of the camp, the placement of the cavalry, the readiness of the guards, and most importantly, the location of the Sultan's own magnificent pavilion. As he listened to the conversations of the soldiers, he overheard a crucial piece of information. Fearing panic and chaos from Vlad's guerrilla tactics, Sultan Mehmed had issued a strict order. No soldier was to leave their tent after dark for any reason. Anyone caught wandering would be assumed to be an enemy infiltrator. A plan began to form in Vlad's mind, a plan so daring, so audacious, it could either win him the war or cost him everything. He now knew the layout of the camp. He knew the state of the army's morale, and he knew the Sultan's own orders had created the perfect conditions for a night of absolute terror. The night attack was coming. Vlad returned to his men, his mind set on a single, terrifying objective: to plunge a dagger into the very heart of the Ottoman Empire. The trap was set. Vlad looked down at the sprawling Ottoman camp, a city of tents teeming with soldiers. Mehmed's orders were clear: no one was to leave their tent after dark, on pain of death. A clever security measure, but Vlad saw its fatal flaw. In the darkness, this order wouldn't just enforce discipline, it would create a prison. He memorized every path, every guard post, every detail of the layout, then slipped away like a phantom, his mind already spinning a web of chaos. Back in his own camp, he gathered his most trusted warriors, 7,000 elite horsemen. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were the hardened veterans of countless brutal frontier wars, men who had stared death in the face and laughed. Their loyalty to Vlad was absolute, forged in the fires of shared hardship and victory. They would follow him into the very jaws of hell if he asked. The preparation was an exercise in ghostly silence. Horses' hooves were wrapped in thick cloth to muffle their steps. Sabers were secured in their scabbards to prevent any telltale rattle. Armor was tightened, every buckle and strap checked and double-checked. Vlad moved among them, a specter of calm confidence in the deepening twilight. He spoke to his men not in grand speeches, but with quiet, reassuring words, his authority radiating from him like a physical force. His plan was as audacious as it was brilliant. He would ride into the heart of the enemy camp, disguised as a loyal Ottoman officer, and unleash hell from within. He waited, patient as a predator, for the darkest hour before dawn, that vulnerable moment when men are deep in sleep, their senses dull, and their minds weakest. Under a starless, ink-black sky, the Wallachians moved out. They were not an army. They were a river of shadows flowing across the land. Vlad rode at their head, his demeanor shifting as they approached the enemy lines. He rode up to the main gate, his posture that of an arrogant Ottoman commander, and called out to the sentries in perfect, unaccented Turkish, demanding they open the way for his patrol. The guards, tired and unsuspecting, saw only a friendly officer doing his duty. They pulled the heavy gates open. That single moment of deception was the spark that ignited the inferno. The instant the gates were ajar, Vlad gave the signal. 7,000 Wallachian cavalrymen thundered into the camp, a tidal wave of steel and fury. Chaos erupted. The disciplined Ottoman camp transformed into a scene from a nightmare. The Wallachians tore through the neat rows of tents, their blades slashing through canvas and flesh. Torches were thrown, and the dry tents went up in flames, casting flickering, monstrous shadows across the pandemonium. Horses, terrified by the fire and the screams, reared and broke free, adding to the bedlam. Mehmed's own order became his army's doom. Trapped inside their tents, thousands of soldiers were cut down before they could even draw their weapons. In the terrifying darkness, confusion was the deadliest enemy. Ottoman soldiers, stumbling out into the night, attacked each other, mistaking friend for foe in the smoke and firelight. Panicked camels, their tethers burned away, stampeded through the burning wreckage, trampling everything in their path. Through it all, Vlad led his personal guard like a spear tip aimed at a single target, the Sultan's magnificent pavilion. He was a whirlwind of death, cutting down anyone who stood in his way, his eyes fixed on the ultimate prize. Mehmed the Conqueror, the man who had brought the Byzantine Empire to its knees, was jolted from his sleep by the sounds of slaughter. He barely escaped with his life, spirited away by his quick-thinking Janissary guards just moments before Vlad's men hacked his opulent tent to ribbons. For 3 long, terrifying hours, the Wallachians rampaged through the camp. They weren't there to hold ground. They were there to spread destruction, panic, and above all, fear. The Ottoman command structure, paralyzed by the sheer shock and confusion of the assault, was powerless to mount an effective defense. They were a giant, blinded and thrashing helplessly. As the first faint hints of dawn threatened to break on the horizon, Vlad gave the signal to withdraw. Their mission was complete. The cavalry melted back into the morning mist as silently as they had arrived, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. The aftermath was catastrophic for the Ottomans. The sun rose on a smoldering ruin. Thousands lay dead or dying. The camp was a blackened, smoking wreck, and vast quantities of vital supplies had been destroyed. The survivors wandered aimlessly through the carnage, their faces masks of trauma and disorientation. Even Mehmed, safe in a secluded corner of the ruined camp, was profoundly shaken. He, the master of siege and strategy, had never been so close to death, so utterly humiliated. The conqueror of Constantinople now knew what it was to feel fear. Weeks passed. Mehmed, regrouping his battered but still massive army, pushed onward toward the Wallachian capital, Târgoviște. He expected a siege, a final battle to crush Vlad's resistance. Instead, he found something far worse. As his army approached the city, they entered a valley that would be seared into their minds forever. On either side of the road, for miles, stood a forest. But this was not a forest of trees. It was a forest of 20,000 impaled corpses. Captured Ottoman soldiers and prisoners, left to rot in the sun. And there, at the very center, on the tallest, most prominent stake, was the decomposing body of Hamza Pasha, one of Mehmed's highest-ranking commanders, a personal friend. The stench of death was so overwhelming it choked the air for miles around. The sight broke the Ottoman army. Mehmed himself, a man accustomed to the brutalities of war, stared in stunned silence. He reportedly declared that he could not take the land from a man who could do such things, a man who understood human nature and rule so diabolically. This was not warfare as he knew it. This was something else entirely, something primeval and terrifying. Overwhelmed by horror, their morale shattered, and gripped by superstitious dread, the mighty Ottoman army began to retreat. The same host that had crossed the Danube with such pomp and confidence now fled back across it in disgrace. The campaign was over. Wallachia, against all odds, was still free. The Sultan's pride lay in tatters. Vlad had taken his greatest weakness, being hopelessly outnumbered, and forged it into his most potent weapon. Through sheer audacity, brilliant deception, and the calculated use of terror, he had defeated the most powerful army on earth. His scorched earth tactics, his lightning-fast guerrilla strikes, and the horrifying spectacle of the night attack and the Forest of the Impaled became a masterclass in psychological warfare. The aura of invincibility that had surrounded Mehmed II was shattered, and news of his humiliation spread across Europe. Vlad's name was cemented in legend, a figure of both monstrous cruelty and strategic genius. He proved that a determined mind could be far mightier than the sword, that fear itself could be honed into a weapon more effective than any cannon. The night attack at Targoviste would go down in history as one of the boldest and most successful military operations ever conceived. In just 3 hours of pure terror, Vlad the Impaler had rewritten the rules of war. His victory was not just for Wallachia, it was a testament to the power of human will, intellect, and the terrifying art of weaponizing fear itself. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into history as fascinating as I did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of unbelievable strategies and legendary figures. See you next time.